thing that I forgot that it was really important to me, and I apologize, but to pray for the victims of Hurricane Ian in Florida. Yes, definitely.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Ms. Knight. It's good to see everyone here tonight. I hope everyone had a nice weekend and survived the hurricane. And we made it back. It's nice to see the sun out today, a beautiful day. So it's good to see everybody. So I will call the meeting to order. I need approval of the agenda. I think before we approve the agenda, I think we have an addition to the agenda.
Yes, sir. Mr. Board Chair, we have discussion item D, discussion of the North Stokes Auto Tech roofing project. We've got an issue that's come up that we need to discuss this evening.
Okay, so that will be added. That will be discussion item D, North Stokes Auto Tech roofing project. Okay, so now do I have approval of the agenda?
I make an approval of the agenda.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye. Our consent agenda, approval of regular session minutes for September 19th, 2022.
I make the motion to approve the consent agenda.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Discussion agenda item A, discussion of West Stokes High School athletic improvements. And we are glad to have with us tonight Dr. Sam Jones.
Thank you, Board. In your packet, we wrote a letter. It's pretty simple and not very complex, but we have a community member who wants to make a generous donation for some specific projects at West Stokes High School that are unique, that our baseball and softball programs would like and have kind of talked about for the last year or two, covering our cages, potentially putting sides on there, but right now we're covering putting a cover, replacing the netting in the baseball and softball cages. That is approximately $75,000 have been committed to those projects. We do have our first set of blueprints, engineered drawings that were submitted to myself, and I contacted Mr. Goins and kind of thought we were ready to move forward. We have not gotten that far down the road, as we were not sure if we would have the softball, and the same person come back and said that he would commit money to softball as well. So that's why we're ready for one and not fully ready for the other one, but softball coach has got pictures, kind of ideas of what he wants, and so we're going to go. Really, hopefully, if all goes well here tonight, then we can move forward pretty quickly, all within hopes of getting them completed, by the start of the season with that. In addition, new basketball goals in the gym, approximately $22,000. We've had a couple of quotes, and they've ranged from 18 to 22. 22, I think, being maybe a little more higher quality of goals, and that's putting the glass goals on the sides and then replacing the two end goals. If the two main goals in the main gym, if we were able to, we have not talked to the installers yet, if we could move those two to the back gym to reuse those to replace, that we will. Again, I'm not sure if that's going to be, if the mounts and everything are going to match up, or if that's going to be, that would be a bonus if we're able to get that. And so any questions?
I think that's a very generous donation.
Sure.
From our community member, and it's my understanding that the community member wants to remain anonymous. Is that correct?
That is correct. He does not want his name to be recognized, and with that, so we're looking to run the funds through our athletic boosters. We've checked with our accountants on the nonprofit status on how much we can accept and do all that stuff, so everything looks good with that. And so he is just very specific onto these projects, and we certainly don't want to not try to take advantage of this unique opportunity.
Board, one thing I would like to suggest in this, in light of the amounts and potential scope of these projects, as we have had projects in the past, and as we will talk about with discussion item D coming up here recently, sometimes there's some unforeseen things that do occur. And, whether you're grading land, putting in electrical, those type things. Sometimes there's some additional expenses that don't come up in the engineer drawings, blueprints, and quotes. And normally, we look at a 10 to 15% contingency fund for projects that I can approve without bringing back to the board if it's in those amounts. And I would like for the board to consider having a 15 or 12%, because what we end up doing is things usually work 10 to 15%, having about a 12.5% contingency for this product using our capital funds if they get into something, and instead of leaving a project half done and incomplete, instead of having to go back to this gentleman and say, hey, thank you for your generous donation of roughly $100,000, but we need 7,000 more, or having to wait until the Wildcat Athletic Club raise 7,000 more. I would like to suggest that the board support this project with a contingency fund, not a match, not that they can go buy higher quality nets and pad their budget, but if something were to come up, that it would be there as contingency money. I think it'd be wise for the board to consider that. And this is not somebody donating a bat. When you start moving land, running wires, doing all that kind of stuff, there are issues that can arise.
Dr. Rice, in the athletic facilities grant that we received from the state, is there extra monies left in that?
Not with what we're planning on doing, there wouldn't be extra in that amount. But
Is some of that depending on the cost of the track at North?
it is, and the one at South,
one at
because
South.
we were planning on both of those projects coming out of that money.
Yeah, so, and we don't know for sure the final cost on those, is that
Correct.
correct? So if those costs come in a little bit less, then we might have a little bit left over.
We could, we would have to change the scope of that project in the grant, because we have submitted that scope of work. But again, out of the capital funds that we have and projects that come in under budget at times, again, I'm talking roughly $12,000, $13,000. We would be able to cover that amount if needed.
Right, okay. Well, I would be in favor of that, and I'd probably be in favor of that being like a 15% contingency. I think when you have such a generous donation from the community, a $100,000 donation from an anonymous donor in the community to our high school, I think it's, I just think it would be good for us if we could do a contingency and maybe chip in a little bit with it too. I just think for us it would be the right thing to do to help out a little bit as well. I think we have the money there in the capital, and we may have it in that athletic grant. And again, I really appreciate the donor for stepping up and providing this money to the school for these athletic facilities. Comments from the board?
Do we have an estimated budget? What you think it's going to cost?
Approximately 50,000 is what was suggested for the baseball. That's where it all started from.
Okay.
Now, it's one of those things that we can go.
You can build
I
as
can have
nice as you want.
$150,000 shelter up there. So we were thinking, 50 is what, and then that we have some contractors and builders that, through just verbal conversations thus far, have said, I think I can get some trusses for us, donated to us. I think I can get, my guys will do all the labor for free. And so I think in a perfect world, we're going to try to be as generous to the donor as possible. If we were able to come out of there at 35,000, we're not going to, we're going to be as transparent with the donor as well. So that was the range that was given. But that was also before softball, so we're trying to get some prices on softball as well to be as equitable as possible, so both have good facilities.
And that's one thing with donations. Title IX does not go away even if it's donations. One of our neighboring school districts went through that a few years ago when a donor wanted to do some dugouts on one but not the other, and Title IX came in after some complaints and they had to fix both. And so in this discussion, we've talked about the need to cover softball as well, and they've been very willing to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I have no problem, but I just,
Yeah, that's kind of I would say that 35 to, that 35 would be our goal, is to get 2 of them out of there for 35 apiece, or ever how it works out. Softball, part of it, softball's gonna be smaller, just because of the pitching distance. We want to be able to throw inside and pitch inside, and so as long as they're similar and comparable, is what we're looking at, so.
yeah, I mean, because we're talking about a $75,000 and 10% is 7,500, so 15%, call it $11,000.
Right.
I'm fine with,
Well, I was
Keeping
combining
that-
the two of 75 and 22, roughly $100,000. So 15%, roughly 15,000, but, looking at the percentage of the two.
If it's a 100,000 donation, then I would say, I would base the 15%,
Right.
I would go ahead and base it on the 100,000. If we don't spend that much on it, then that's okay.
Right.
And we may not have, he may not need
Right.
need anything, but I'd hate to see such a nice donation and such a nice project, and then they need a little bit, they just need to do a little bit more to make it just right.
finish it.
Yeah. And,
Yeah, with that generous of a donation, I would hate to have to go back and ask for a little more, or pause and not finish on time while we're waiting to raise money.
Yeah, or
Do
not,
other
or not
way.
make it as nice a project as practical we could. We want to be practical and good with our funds, which I'm sure Dr. Jones will, but I just think it'd be nice for us to help them a little bit too.
Now, I want to be clear, we're going to make him one baseball over here, then one for softball over here. 2 separate, complete buildings, basically,
Yes.
shelters, whatever. And you're going to have how many batting cages in each one? 1, 2?
2 is the goal to have. Now, the coaches are working on how they want that designed, whether they want, tee stations and soft toss, front toss stations. With that, the softball is is more limited in space as well, but it'd be comparable to what they have now. They have 1 long cage, and so, we haven't gone up there and really measured stuff off, to add to it, but the goal is to be able to get 2 cages, to have 2 full cages in both places.
There's not a lot of space up at the softball field, is it?
No, it's, and if you come down the hill, you got a main sewer line that runs, I believe, and a water line that's right there. So it's not we're gonna get the most of what we can up there. I do know that.
Okay. All right.
Is
Any
this
other-
going to cause any issue with us potentially backstopping financials since it's done through a independent Wildcat Athletic Club? Ms. Moore?
I think it should go through school funds, but are you approving the project and not the acceptance of the funds? That's the question I have.
Well, the reason we suggested Wildcat Athletic Club is because, again, if he's saying, I'm willing to donate 100,000 for the 2 projects, but if it comes in at 80,000, I'd like my 20,000 back. I want to give to the project, but I'm not giving, a bunch extra. And so sometimes we're giving refunds to an individual after a donation's been made. Thought that would be easier through the Wildcat Athletic Club, to be able to write a check back to an individual versus us. But
That was just my concern. If you're accepting the donation,
well,
You-
the board wasn't talking about accepting the
Right.
donation. The board was talking about approving the project on our grounds.
right?
And
That's
so
the question.
and then potentially kicking some money in if necessary, but basically approving the project, even though it's privately funded, because it is going to be on our grounds, which we would have to maintain moving forward through capital funds if necessary, just as the same way we do when a Little League puts in lights somewhere, we maintain the lights afterwards. So we needed to approve the project before we allowed them to do it.
They were basically just giving them permission to do this on our property.
Now, with the extra funds, the percentage, are we giving that to the project, or are we giving it to the athletic boosters to use for the project?
At that point, I would say we would pay on the project. Just like we would maintain it later,
Reason-
we would finish it off.
Right. Just want to be sure, you know.
Okay?
Well, I think it's a wonderful and generous offer, and I think it's really insightful for the person that's donating for many years to come for students to use it, and so I approve it.
Okay. So I guess we'll need to go with this as a motion, move it to action.
I make a motion, we move it to action.
And I guess in our, we can take care of an action, though, approving the 15% contingency. We just do that. So we're going to move this over to action. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
All in favor? So it's on action agenda. It will be action item B, discussion or West Stokes High School athletic improvements. Okay. And while I got Dr. Jones here, I had the opportunity to speak with Dr. Jones Thursday night over at the West Stokes football game. And Dr. Jones was informing me of some of the achievements of the high school, of West Stokes High School. And he was a proud papa, right? He was proud of his school, proud of what they had accomplished. And I know we had a presentation from Mr. Sands, I guess it was at our last meeting, we went over the achievements and grades of the school, but all the information we get from Mr. Sands, sometimes it gets lost in translation. And Dr. Jones was telling me about some of the achievements of West Stokes, and while he's here tonight, we don't have such a long agenda. I would just like for him to take a few minutes and maybe just and maybe share with the board the information that you shared with me at the football game, if you don't mind.
Certainly. I am extremely proud of our students and staff. And last week, we had Spirit Week, and with it being homecoming, and had an ice cream party on Thursday, when we first kind of announced some of the successes that we had. We were able to exceed growth last year, and did so very well, while also I think we bumped up our graduation rate a little bit as well. And so a lot to be proud of with that. We try to get every win that we can and celebrate it because our teachers deserve it. And that's really just what it's about, is the work that our teachers do day in and day out. And, we ask a lot for them, and it ain't always easy. I say it's not complicated, but it's hard, being in education. We're going to love children and teach every day. And so just really grateful and proud of them, with their, and it's beyond test scores. You do the other stuff, test scores will take care of itself a lot of times. So I don't want to put so much, pressure and emphasis on them, but that is how we're measured, and we are certainly proud of their work that they've done this past year. And so I think that unofficially, I'll make sure of my calculations, I think of traditional high schools, we were thinking the top 20 in growth last year, which was awesome and stuff for us to celebrate. We had a cake last week for staff, and so I'll certainly brag on our teachers and students any chance we get, because we're certainly blessed with great ones, and we don't probably get to recognize them enough for all that they do. So shout out to them for sure, and thank you for giving me the chance to brag on them.
That was a top 20% of growth in the state, is that correct?
Yeah, it's all comparison to the state.
Yeah.
Yep.
I was very impressed with with those words that he had at the game last Thursday night, and I just thought it was something that it was worth repeating here tonight and maybe getting it out a little bit better to the general public, and they are doing a great job there. It is a great school. I had a family move to King here recently, and they were trying to decide between Davie High School and West Stokes High School, and they were comparing the two, and they decided to go with West Stokes High School. They thought it was the better of the two schools, and to me, that was a big win right there. That's because we know Davie County's got a great high school, but we also should be proud of West Stokes. I think it is a great school as well. So I just want to say, Dr. Jones, thank you for the work you're doing at West Stokes. Keep it up. Tell the teachers congratulations, and we are really excited about what's happening at the school.
Yes, sir, we'll do. Thank y'all.
Yes, sir. Thank you. All right, that brings us to a discussion item B, discussion of renewal, increased services of tech support services contract. I think that's Ms. Barker.
Good evening, board members. In your packet, you'll see the contract, the NITOR renewal contract. Included in that, you will see the services provided, just the highlights. There's 25 physical servers that the contract covers. There are 31 virtual servers that the contract covers, and within those virtual servers, that is across all of our departments. We have our key access for Meadowbrook, North and South in those virtual servers. We have Johnson Controls in those virtual servers. We have the Power School test virtual server in there. It's not the link server, the printer server. It's across the board of many areas. There's 3 managed SANs, which is our storage arrays. And then we have 139 monitoring agents, which is monitoring our switches. Highlights include Sentinel-1 on all servers, which is an additional layer of protection. They will email alerts when servers are down, and I'll get a phone call that servers are down at our schools. It's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week monitoring. They do backups, our help with our backups, file recovery, our server patch installations, firmware upgrades, as well as build images that we can push out to our desktops. After Fred's revisions and recommendations were made, they submitted the contract back to us. Lynette Moore, Tamara Rhodes, Sonia Norman, and I evaluated the contract and have submitted for renewal. So at this time, are there any questions on the contract renewal?
Board, any questions for Ms. Barker?
Do you need this renewed tonight, or is it good to wait until the regular session meeting?
I would like to recommend it move to action,
It has a November 1st start date.
but since it has a November start date, we could wait till the next meeting if you
I say
all
we just
would
put
like.
it on action for next and vote on it there.
Put on action or consent, or,
I mean, consent's fine.
okay.
Is that okay, Ms. Barker, if we do that at next meeting?
Yes, sir.
Okay, any other questions for Ms. Barker? Okay, so we'll move this over to the consent agenda for next meeting.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Barker. That brings us to discussion item C, discussion of middle school coaching allotment. Mr. Jones, I'd say.
Thank you, Mr. Robertson. Board members, on the 21st of July, 2021, the Board of Education approved the addition of a middle school swim coach. I believe Mr. Sammons came and probably presented alongside Dr. Taylor and advocated for an additional swim coach at the middle school level due to the increase in numbers and needed more personnel to help oversee and manage that group of athletes. And so the board approved that at that meeting. And so our current salary schedule is such that the head swim coach and the assistant swim coach are paid the exact same. Because we haven't had an assistant swim coach prior to that meeting, we placed them on our scale with track and with volleyball and soccer. And so what it did was place them on the exact same scale. Therefore, they were making the exact same dollar amount on both positions. And so we would like to respectfully request that the middle school head swim coach position be moved up one level in our current pay structure so that the head and assistant coaches are paid accordingly to their responsibilities that they have. And you can see the proposal on the subsequent pages, the middle school allotment there. You can see the strike through for the head swim coach and then the proposed scale for that swim coach as well. It would cost approximately between $150 and $300 depending on the years of experience and where they fall on that scale.
Okay. Board, any questions for Mr. Jones?
Not really questions, but more a statement. I would also like to move the cheer and cross-country over because those don't align with our high schools. But if we move the cheer and cross-country over to where we're saying the proposed swim and golf are, then all of the middle school coaches' band and classifications will line up with the classifications for the high schools.
That
So
is true.
succinct. It's not like we think a cheer in middle school is less valuable than a cheer in high school.
Yes, I agree with you, Mr. Rogers. That's a good recommendation, and it would make us consistent from our middle and high school down to the high school down to the middle school level. I don't have numbers on that, obviously, but it probably costs us anywhere from $1,000 to $1,500 to probably do that. But we can certainly get the numbers for you. I expect it would be pretty minimal to make that switch.
Okay. Any other comments from the board about that? Questions?
No, I agree with Mr. Rogers. I think that it would make it more fair. I do.
Okay.
So I'll make a motion to move that to action.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Okay, that brings us to discussion item D, North Stokes Auto Tech Roofing Project. Mr. Goins.
Yes, board members, we run into an issue putting the roof on the North Stokes Auto Tech. If y'all familiar with that roof, it kind of has slanted sides all the way around the building and a flat top. Before we bid this, we hired a roofing company, AAR, to go up and do a core. We assumed he took the core out of the slant roof because that's what most of them do, the closest one to the ladder. Well, during installation, they got all the sides on, but when they got on the top part of the roof, they couldn't get the fasteners to drill through the roof, through the existing tar and gravel roof. Talking with the engineer, we first thought that it was this kind of type stone they used on the roof was preventing that. But after further investigation, Richie and I went back and we had found documentation less than 10 years after after that building was built, they put a new roof on it. So what we feel like happened, even after talking with an engineer today, is the flat part kept leaking and they kept coming back and adding tar and gravel on the flat part to make it thicker. And that's why the fasteners will not go through the top part. They're recommending, after talking with the engineer and contractor, is tearing the top part off down to the insulation, putting additional ISO board back in, and then putting the roofing material on that. And that additional cost would be $47,800. Even with that additional cost, with the material increase on the job, we bid we had a budgeted, $195,500 for the project. If the board approves this change order tonight, we will still have $18,635 left on the project. The only thing will be left to pay out of that is $5.50 per foot for the perimeter nailers. And that's unknown at this point, but it won't be $18,000. So even with this change, we will be within budget of what was originally budgeted for the project.
Now, you're saying the perimeter nailers?
Mm-hmm. That's usually like a 2x6, 2x8, depending, and they just charge per linear foot to tear it off, put it on, and what they have to do on that, they have to document what they tear off and put back, and then the engineer signs off on that on a pay app. They don't just tell us what it is, but the engineer has to sign off on the pay app before we pay it, that they've done the work. But they document that and give it to the engineer.
How are they planning on fastening that to the roof?
What's that?
The nailers?
The nailers are typically screwed in or fastened to the or what they're fastening. It depends on what they're fastening it to. Because a lot of times the wood's good underneath or concrete. They have to go to the concrete and fasten it down, depending on how they have to fasten it down.
Okay.
But in most cases, it's good unless it's leaked right along the edge. You have to take out the rotted and put in the new.
Didn't the original cost include those for the original roof that they can't get to fasten down?
The nailers that was part of the original bid.
Right.
And that's common with any engineer that we've used. They'll put you have linear foot costs in there for stuff like that's unknown. You might tear the roof off and all the nailers are good or half the nailers may be bad. So they just put a linear foot cost in there for that. But again, they have to prove documentation to the engineer that he signs off on the pay app before they pay that.
I guess my question is, are we paying for the nailers twice?
No. The nailers along the perimeter edge, this is what we're looking at is on top. But I don't know the cost of the nailers, or I can't give the board an actual cost to this because I haven't saw any pay app or anything. But the perimeter, they've already got that in. They've got the slope sides in on the roof up there. They just couldn't put the top part on it. And part of this cost is too, is removing a piece of equipment, which is the exhaust fan for the fumes. They have to take it off, work around it, and put it back also.
How well is this fan working? This exhaust fan?
It looked in rough shape. We hadn't had any
I was going to
complaints.
say, now would be the time.
We hadn't,
I mean, truthfully, now would be the time to replace it.
we hadn't got any work orders set and it wasn't working.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I think for me is, I mean, I have the contractor looked at the roof before he bid it, right?
All the contractors looked at the roof. What we're looking at was unforeseen. It was underneath an existing rubber roof.
What is our have we decided what our contract says about that? I know we were trying to
We
get
talked with Mr. Johnson, Mr. Jones and I talked to Mr. Johnson today. I sent him a copy of the contract. It was in Article 10.3, and it basically talks about the unforeseen items. And he said it would be up to the engineer, and I forwarded an email to Mr. Jones and Mr. Johnson before the meeting that he felt like this was valid because the top part is thicker than what's along the edge. So what the contractors ran into was something that was unforeseen, that we didn't know it was there, it existed until they ran into it. Because like I said, along the edge of the roof where it's sloped, they put the material on it and everything worked fine. It's just when I got on the very flat top part, it's when it wouldn't work. And they just couldn't get, the rock and stuff is just so thick, they couldn't drill through it.
So they assumed that what was on the side was the same it was on the top.
Because you don't go on a roof and take, 20 different core samples to try to figure out what's good and bad. You take a
Right.
core sample, and all the years I've done it, it's all been the same. And that's why we're thinking, and it's just like putting a puzzle together, without seeing the pictures, why is it thicker on top than it is on the sides? And the only conclusion we could come up with, since they put a roof on less than 10 years, when the building was less than 10 years old, that the flat part was leaking and under warranty, they just kept coming back putting tar and gravel to try to get it to quit leaking and couldn't get it to quit. And it was just thicker on the flat part than it was the sides. But they've got the sides on. Then when they got to the top to do the top, it wouldn't work. And they tried different styles, fasteners and things, and they couldn't get anything that would work. The other option they had was to come in with a material called, it's Trimco. It's a liquid, you put down a liquid, then put your fiber in it, put down another layer of liquid, but you're putting down this liquid material, and I'm not really sold on that. And it was 57 something. It was higher than this to do that.
Mr. Jones, you have any comments on this?
I have not spoken to Mr. Johnson since the email was sent. I mean, based on the information I have from Mr. Goins and speaking to Mr. Johnson today, I do think it falls underneath that unforeseen circumstance. I'm not sure a contractor would have been able to see or know that in the inspection process.
If we would have had known this up front on the top, then it would have been in their bid documents just to tear that off. So we were going to pay more either way. We're just paying it after the fact instead of before the fact. But we didn't know that the top was like that.
Who was the engineer on this?
Moorfield Engineering.
And you said there were core samples drilled?
We paid a contractor to go up and take the core samples and send a report to, but AAR is the one that did the core samples. It does our roof repairs. They
Right.
did because when you do a core, you got to patch it. So they did the core samples and sent the report to the engineer.
But they core drilled the sides
Well, I say sides, it's a slope.
or the slope?
Typically, when I've been with to take cores, they're going to get off the ladder, take the core 5 or 10 foot from the ladder, close as they can get it. And I'm just assuming that I wasn't with him. We just told them to go up and do the core sample, what building it was, because they knew which building it was. They've done repairs on it where it was leaking. So we're just assuming, based on the core samples, everything worked. We're just assuming he took the core samples off the side because the top was thicker, and that was not in the report.
So we're not even sure where they took the core samples at.
No,
How much did we pay for the core samples?
I'm not sure. The core samples are not much.
So
It's
did
probably
the
in
AA, whatever group, what did you call them?
AAR roofing.
Yeah, so, I mean, they're a little bit in the mix with the issue at question?
No,
I mean, as far as where they,
no, Allied Roofing.
Data.
Allied Roofing, who is the one that got the bid.
How far apart was Allied Roof and AAR on
Yeah,
the
they-
quote?
What I'm saying, the sample itself.
I don't have the bid tab with me. One roof was, the low bid was 111,815. One bid was 140 some, and one bid was 152. The top two were closer than the bottom one.
So if you add the two together, the top two already had it figured in.
It would have been more if
Well,
you
then,
added the
you
four,
know,
if you
two or
added the 40,
3,000.
if you added the 40-some thousand to it.
With 158 here, and with 147 and 152.
But that wasn't in the
think
scope of work.
That wasn't in
Allied
the
just
documents,
missed
that wasn't in the scope. The scope was to anchor it down. The scope was, there's nothing in the scope to tear anything off.
Right, but it was to anchor it down.
It was to anchor it down. And the issue they're getting into is on that thick gravel, the anchors will not drill through the gravel and in through the deck. It just dulls the bit. They didn't have any issues on the side. It worked fine on the side because that was based, that's why we're assuming they took the core samples off the side, because usually the tar and gravel's not that thick on a roof. And,
When would potential demolition of all this take place?
they've already got the sides done.
I mean, the thick
Another two
stuff
called.
that you're saying would potentially come off, or not?
That's whenever they get approved the change order. But they've got the sides completed. And when they got the sides completed, that's when they ran into this. So they've been testing other anchors to see what other options they have. And then we just found out at the end of last week, this is where we're at. We need to tear this top part off and tear that tar and gravel off, put down ISO board. It was broken down. It was 28,000 and some change for materials and 19,000 something for labor.
We're mid-project in this, correct? We're mid-project in this right now. We're
Oh, they're
working
halfway
on
through it. They're halfway
We're
through it.
halfway through it, and now we're paused, waiting to find out if we approve the money to fix
Because
it
they was
this
rolling,
way.
they were putting the sides on just when they got to the top and hit, they could not get the anchors to go through.
Here's my thought. Somewhere it's negligent. Either the core samples that were drilled,
That
that
was
we
my
don't know
question.
where got drilled.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know if they drilled them in the right spot. We don't know where they drilled them. We don't even know that they drilled them. They could have just said we drilled them. Or the engineer should have specified where they're drilled, because we're paid more field engineering. But
Like
yet, we're the
X
ones that's
marks
supposed to
the
open our checkbook for $47,400 and some odd, or $500.
Yeah, that's the problem I have is we're not at fault for this. We bid it out, we let them look at it, we let them drill the core samples, we go ahead, just check everything that you want to check out. And now it's not working out for them, and they're coming back to us wanting more money. And I think that's the problem that I have with it is, because I've not been in this specific situation before, but in the construction industry, I've had problems that arise before, and sometimes you just got to go with it.
Well, isn't this basically the opposite situation we had at Chestnut Grove, where we, wasn't a core sample, but it was.
It
a
was the
foot-
metal. It was
If
the metal.
foot went through
They went through the metal decking.
the decking. So the assumption was that we would need all new decking all over the roof, and so we bid out the project that way. But then when they took the
We
top.
budgeted a project
We
that way.
budgeted the project that way. But then when they got into it, we didn't have to replace all the decking, and we saved $200,000.
In that project, in the bid documents, they had in there, it was so many square feet they had to replace. And then they did a cost per square foot after the fact, if you run into more than what was in the bid documents. Well, when they got into it, they didn't have to replace as much as was in the bid documents. Well, they came back and gave us a credit on that. Because we was estimating 1.2, I think, it was just over $1 million, what the roof was gonna cost, and it come in about $500,000.
And then we had the same basic thing where we talked about at North Stokes Track, that you couldn't do enough core samples to guarantee that you weren't going to get hit rock.
Exactly.
But
And
where you did the core samples, we didn't hit rock, but we wanted a contingency and wanted the board to know that, now, if we hit rock, it's going to cost this. And we haven't hit rock, so we're not coming in over there. So, I don't know that it's necessarily negligence.
But it wasn't
but it-
accounted for
but it-
in the bid, like Mr. Bryant mentioned.
in this one company's bid. The other two companies, one of them did the core sample, and they're up there $40,000 higher
I don't know about that.
than this company is.
But their bids were on the same
They were,
scope of
they were
work.
bidding a project
Yeah.
on the same bid
Right,
documents.
but we got two guys that's up here within 4,000, then we got this here 35,000 less.
That's common in roofing.
I mean,
I've had some that's been $75,000 and $80,000
yeah,
different.
I'm just thinking that they they didn't,
Me personally, I don't say they missed anything. They were all bidding on the same bid documents provided by the engineer, based on the same core sample, that again, that we assume was on the slope because that's where it's thin.
that's right, that's what we're assuming, we don't know.
What
What if the core's up there on the top?
Well, if I'm a contractor, why am I gonna go in and bid more, knowing I'm not gonna get the job if somebody else is bidding on a thinner core sample? That's the question I have. I feel like there's not negligence on anybody.
What
Us,
happens if
engineer,
we
roofing
decide?
contractor, it's a problem we ran into, and we need to address it. We're still gonna be within budget. If we'd have known this up front, they'd have bid tearing it off. And would have still, the base bid would have been more at that point.
What happens if we don't agree to pay any extra cost to tear it off?
They've got a temporary roof on it now. Our warranty, I assume our warranty would be voided on what's there. We won't have a warranty on it, because they had to put a temporary roof on that part of the roof that they had torn off. Because they would tear a section off, replace, tear a section off, replace, and they tore that section off. Because you can't have over two roofs on a building.
Right, but what happens if we
So
don't
they're-
agree to pay the extra money? That's what I'm asking.
I'm assuming we can leave what's there, but we won't have any warranty on it.
So the
Because
company,
the project's not completed. The manufacturer's not gonna warranty a partially completed job.
do we owe the company now money if they
Oh,
walk?
yeah, absolutely. We're gonna have to pay the
We're
roofers because they've
mid-project.
got over half the project completed.
But they didn't complete it.
They put the roof on half the building. The size.
Was there
the
a
roof-
contract for half the building or for the entire building?
The entire building. We would have to pay them.
So they hadn't completed their project.
They haven't completed the project, but they've completed half the work. And they could sue us for that, and I'm assuming they would win because they've completed part of the project.
The rubber roofing, so they're tearing the rubber
They're
roofing off.
tearing the rubber roof off, leaving the tar and gravel in
Leaving the
place.
tar and gravel, why can't they, clean up the tar and gravel and,
That's an engineering question.
put the, strips down with the, foam glue that'll hold it from now on?
Because
and
if I'm an
fasten
engineer,
it to it?
if I'm an engineer and I don't know how the tar and gravel roof's attached, I'm not gonna sign off on that.
Well, evidently, he didn't know anything else about it, because we're having this discussion.
It's an issue we've run into. We've run into issues before. I'll do whatever the board directs me to do.
I'm okay with Mr. Goins' recommendation personally.
Well, I'd like to know if they could, bend it down to the tar and gravel, if they could glue the,
Well, if the board would like to
down.
email me any questions, so I know I'm asking the engineer exactly what they want to know, I'll be glad to pass that information along and get the answers.
I think at this point, it's just lots of questions,
I'm sure.
you know.
I mean, $50,000, you know, and the other two contractors added that kind of cost into their bid, but this one didn't.
But we
That is what
I
accept,
don't think the other contractors added
I
it.
know, but we accept.
It was not in the
this
scope to
bid.
tear a roof off in the other contractor's bid. That was not in the document, the bid documents, to tear any roof off.
But fastening it to the roof was, and they put enough in there to make sure they had the money to cover it if they run into something. I mean, it's obvious. When you got two of them within $4,000, you got.
Bids are all over the place on roofing bids.
Yeah, I could see it if there was $10,000 to $20,000 between all of them, but we got two of them that's right there within $4,000 each other. So I'm thinking if this company.
And I've had two of the lowest bids
we
be
shouldn't
within
have to bail
$4,000
them
of each
out.
other. I've had bids where lowest bids has been within just a few $1,000s of each other.
Exactly.
And the other bid be $60,000, $80,000 more. They just look at it different, look at different man hours they're gonna put into it. Again, me personally, I don't see any negligence on anybody's part. This is just something that when we got into the project, we ran into. We don't do core samples all over the roof. Again, at Mount Olive, as big as that roof is, we did one core sample.
So it's not an uncommon practice, that's established.
No, we've done
Right.
the same procedure we've always done. Do
Right.
a core sample. You just don't go and assume that you're gonna run into different thicknesses of, and we never have.
See, what's getting me going on this is the fact that the people that did the core sample are way up here. And they gave all
Well, the other
that to
company that didn't do
engineer.
the core
Why were
samples
they
up there
way
as well.
here? Why were they way up here if they done the core samples? I mean.
Well, you have another company that's right up there with them that didn't do the core sample. I mean, you could ask,
but
why
he
are they
read-
up there?
He looked at the,
They all had the same bid documents.
they sure did.
So the
They
one that
knew
done the
the
core
fact that-
sample had the same bid documents as the one that was within $4,000 had the same bid documents.
Well, they
and the
need
same
to
as the low
fasten it
bid.
to the
All right.
roof like the scope of work says.
Mr. Goins, this is a discussion item tonight. I know you were hoping to move it to action to keep progress on moving the roof forward, but it's a discussion item tonight. If we need to ask more questions, if we would like to collect a list of questions for the board to ask the engineer, to ask the people that did the core sample, whatever the questions all are we in the drive for the next 2 weeks to, we're not calling?
I'm assuming so. They got a temporary roof, and I hadn't heard of any leaks yet.
Okay, so if the board is not ready to move this to action to do this, we need to provide what questions that you would like to ask of whom, and then we could have Fred again go over it with the contract, with the engineer specifically, with the questions that you provided, and have that information ready for next week. We know this was rushed, put in the agenda today based on when we found out the information. Mr. Goins brought the information to us first thing this morning, and we sent y'all the email out, but obviously we got questions that need to be answered. So if we're in the drive for the next 2 weeks, would y'all like to develop your list of questions this evening, or would y'all like to submit them before Wednesday of this week?
I guess the question for the board is, do we have a consensus one way or the other? Do we want to investigate further, or are we okay paying the extra cost to tear the roof off? Is there a basic consensus on that?
This contractor's done several roofs for us in the past.
I'm talking now, if you don't mind. I'm swallowing my ability to pay for this, but I want somebody to tell me why we paid an engineer to tell somebody to drill a core sample, and everything was good, and then all of a sudden, everything isn't on a $150,000 project. That's in a nutshell. I think we're gonna wind up having to pay it. I'm gonna seriously question whether we use the same matrix for selecting the next time we need a roof.
Ms. Knight?
I agree with Mr. Rogers. I mean, I would like to move on with the project, and we'll probably end up needing to pay the difference so we don't sit here with a temporary roof, but legal advice as well as further communication with the engineer is fine. I do appreciate Mr. Goins being caught in the middle with all of our questions and handling it so well. Thank you. Because you're the middle guy, but you're in the tough spot, you know. So hopefully we can get more answers and know how to proceed. And if we do not need to act on it for safety reasons, then I'm okay acting on it at the next meeting.
Ms. Messick?
Well, I feel like that in all the years that I've been on the board, we've had a lot of roofs put on the buildings. And it's just like Mr. Goins says, something crops up every once in a while, an unforeseen problem, and this is one of these unforeseen problems. We all agreed when Mr. Goins brought this to the board to recommend or to accept this company that put the roof on. And yes, there seems like there's a problem. There does seem like it, but I think he's right in the fact that we can't just like stop in the middle and say we're not going to pay it. So I am with Mr. Goins. I'm just saying that I think we need to just go on and put the roof on and make it right up at North Stokes. So yes, I think there's a lot of questions that some of you have, and they're legitimate questions. But I think in the end, you know, we'll have to put the roof on. So I agree with Mr. Goins.
Well, I spent about an hour talking to a guy today that was over capital projects in Forsyth County over the roofs only. And he's put on more roofs than we got schools. Not knocking anybody, but he told me a different way that could be done without having to tear the roof off and save us some money. I would like to look into that before we decide to spend that much money.
Well, has he seen the roof at North Stokes?
No, but he's seen enough roofs to know that, he told me a product that they use on some in that situation, when you got tar and gravel, it's a spray adhesive, it's like a foam, and you put your dens board that you tie your roof down to, you put that down with it, and they've had real good luck with it.
Well, that sounds
Well, what
like,
about the
He works
company you're
for
working
more
with now?
engineers than just Moorfield. He named 3 or 4 different engineers he worked with.
But
So
right now,
different
we're working with
engineers,
Mr. Morfield.
yeah, but different engineers have different ways of doing it, and I guess I'm trying to say is that maybe Mr. Moorfield in this box, and some of the other engineers is in this box, and maybe we could ask Mr. Moorfield about it and see if he'd sign off on something like that. I mean, it's not gonna hurt to ask. It's a $50,000 question.
okay. Well, from what we understand, we think that the roof is probably secure the way it is. It's not leaking. I think the board does have a lot of questions about this. And I kind of agree with Mr. Rogers and Ms. Knight both that, I think we probably will end up having to pay the extra money to tear the roof off and redo it. But at the same point, I think somebody there along the way was negligent. And I would just like to have somebody step up and say, yeah, maybe this is what happened. I understand, from what you've already told us, there was probably an extra roof added on we didn't know about. But I think maybe just a little further investigation into it would make the board feel a little bit better, make us a little bit more at ease with spending that kind of money on it. I'm not going to say that we won't do that, but I think maybe just getting some more questions answered would probably put our minds at ease a little bit as we're trying to manage the monies that we have. And I am sorry that you've kind of got caught in the middle of this. That's maybe not the best part of your job description that you enjoy the most, but unfortunately, that's where you are. And I just want you to understand that all the back and forth here is not, it's not directed at you personally. It's that
I know that.
It's that, that we're just a little discouraged that we may have to come back and, write another check for $47,800 to tear the roof off and redo it. And I would like to get maybe an opinion too from Mr. Johnson as the contract and get his take on it. Unfortunately, he's at a hearing tonight and not be able to join us in person. And that would give us a chance, I think, over the next couple of weeks to get an opinion from him and be able to go forward with it. But I do think that we probably are going to end up having to pay the money and do it. But so would that be acceptable, do you think, to you?
Absolutely. I'll get some more information and bring it back to the board at the next meeting, and we'll discuss it with Mr. Johnson as well.
Yeah, I mean, and I think we'd all would admit that this came up pretty quickly, right?
Yes.
Just since Friday afternoon, we hadn't.
Well, I knew they had run into the issue, and they were looking at different anchors, and again, I'm assuming they're going to find an anchor that's going to work.
Yeah,
We found out at the end of last week that they can't find anything that'll work.
yeah. So let's give us a little time. If any of the board members have questions that they'd like specifically answered, please email them to Mr. Goins. I think the general question would be an opinion from on the contract.
Other options
Maybe
more
that we might
cost-effective
could solve it otherwise. Opinions about the contract, if we are actually liable, and then maybe a little bit more who is actually responsible for this. if it's not us, and who, you know, if is it the core sample guy, is it the engineer? Somebody dropped the ball along the way a little bit. We feel like if we made the roof accessible to them, they could check it out, they could do anything they wanted to the roof before they signed the contract. Now, they signed it to put a roof on it, and, you know, and in my construction experience, I say, you know, they signed the contract to put a roof on it, put the roof on it. But I know in a perfect world that don't always happen. So anyway, we do appreciate you bringing it to our attention, and again, don't take it personal.
I'm not.
We're not mad at you in any
understand.
sense, any way. You're just it's just your job. So
I understand.
you know, but we do appreciate your hard work on it and what you're doing for us, and trying to get all these projects completed, and unfortunately, it just happened this time, but,
It seems like everything happens at North Stokes as well.
yeah,
And both times we hit a rock.
yeah,
The one time we didn't. The one time we thought we were gonna hit a rock, we didn't. When we didn't think we would, we did.
It's true.
okay.
right,
Thank you,
Board
Mr.
members.
Goins. We'll put this back
Thank
on
you.
discussion again in 2 weeks, and address it again, maybe have a few more answers, and see how it goes at that point, okay? Thank you, Mr. Goins. All right, so that brings us to our action agenda. Action item A, approval of personnel and coaching. Do I have a motion?
Make a motion to approve personnel and coaching as presented.
Okay, do I have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye. Action item B is the West Stokes High School athletic improvements with
Yeah,
a
make-
15% contingency.
I make a motion to approve the West Oaks athletic improvements with 15% contingency.
Okay? Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye. And action item C would be the middle school coaching allotment. And Mr. Jones, if you can help me a little bit, is it moving the cheer, swim, and cross-country? Is that moving to the another level, or how would that?
One level up, yes. on the-
Okay,
on
so that'd be the
salaries.
middle school coaching allotment, move the cheer, swim, and cross-country coaching allotment up one level
To where golf is.
Yes.
to the same amount as
Cheer,
golf.
yes, sir.
Yeah,
Make a
cheer.
motion to approve.
Okay, do I have a
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Brings us to information and announcements. Mr. Jones?
Thank you, Mr. Robertson. Board members, I just want to remind you about our next meeting on the 17th of October. It's at 6 p.m. here in the boardroom for a regular session. You also have fundraisers and field trip requests in your packet. I do want to draw your attention to the Germanton Elementary. They're hosting a spaghetti supper and math night on Tuesday, October the 11th. I know that'll be a great event, and Ms. Gallimore and her staff have put in a lot of work to make that happen. So want to draw your attention to that. I also want to update you on 2 grants that we have applied for in the past couple of months. The first is a Duke Energy Foundation grant. I am pleased to announce that we were the recipient of $12,000 from Duke Energy Foundation grant to provide professional development to our principals, assistant principals, and instructional coaches. This goes to enhance our instructional programming at our schools through a train-the-trainer model. Our principals and assistants, along with instructional coaches, are being equipped with resources and professional development they can go back and deliver to their schools. And so we are pleased to be the recipient of that grant. I do want to thank Ms. Brandy Jones for her work in that and securing those funds. Mr. Rose, anything you want to add?
No, you turned out well.
Okay. The second grant that I wanted to update you on, we were not so fortunate to receive. That was the Needs-Based School Capital Fund grant that we had put in. I think it was probably about a month ago. We had submitted that and brought it before you. We had 4 schools and 5 roofing projects that we requested. We did not receive any grant funds from that. There were only 9 school districts out of 72 that applied that actually received funds, and we were not one of those. Out of the 9, 6 of the schools or school systems receive funds for brand-new schools. And so, again, we'll continue to pursue that grant as it becomes available year in and year out, hopefully, and other grant opportunities that might help offset some of our capital projects. But that's all I have.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Jones. Okay, that brings us to the end of our agenda. No other comments or business. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Do you have a second? All in favor? Aye. We are adjourned.
Thank you.
You Yep, yep, that's all, folks.
Wasn't it quick? Quick, quick.